Hi, Dr. Joe. I'm going to present that Eden and Gethsemane are connected by the tabernacle, that salvation and redemption are two of the key components. They're going to be separate, but they are going to be the same thing. And Gethsemane is the second, but we are going to go through the tabernacle, which is referenced in Hebrews 8, 1 through 5, of it pointing to the priesthood of Christ. So this plan is reflected in the initial setting of Eden, which you might call a cosmic temple. And I am going to make some allusions to the cosmic temple, Isaac being the son of Abraham, Isaac, our star, the son of Abraham, is the periodic element. So I am going to make a reference to that. To do this, we have 4 steps. We have a great garden, and there needs to be some details we have listed below. Sons and daughters, land, covenants, and the buildings, which has to do with the tabernacle and eventually the temple. And you said, think about the book of Genesis. There's 50 chapters, and out of it, there's 12 for Abraham, and there's 12 for Joseph. And so people are the most important thing in God's, his plan. But there are other things like the covenants and the building, of course. The land, the first children were called from Abraham, and then they go to Egypt and Sinai and Israel. We do have prophets, priests, and kings we will discuss as well. Hill and Watson says, in this view, the covenant with Abraham established Israel as the revelatory people of God, the people through whom he would reveal himself to the world. The law that was given on Sinai is a major part of the revelation that the covenant was established to provide. At the same time, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Joshua contain covenant renewals that reinforce the agreement. The Davidic covenant brings to fulfillment some of the initial promises of God to Abraham, like the kings. And at the same time, expands the agreement to include a dynastic line. The prophets speak of the future and of future covenants. And these generally relate to the eventual fulfillment of aspects of the previous covenants that have been unrealized. because of the failures of the Israelites. And if God wanted perfection, he certainly went the wrong direction with making human beings. So I think there's a higher purpose in all of this. And we have here several covenants. The first is Edenic, Abrahamic, Noah, which if you see the bow, then God will not destroy the land. The Davidic is the kings, always having a king on the throne of Israel, Jerusalem. Exilic, post-exilic. Sinai would be Moses. And going into the promised land. One of the things that I thought was really interesting is the Toledot when I studied this years ago, because the several generations equate to the powers of 10, because if we're talking about the atom in a garden would be the atom in the periodic elements. They weren't contradistinct. At one point, it wasn't until the 1800s that Mendeleev made them into a table. So they weren't cohesively recorded. They were always what they were naturally, but it helps us to understand that God made this garden of periodic elements, and one of the first things he did was make the atom, atom. And one of the abilities to go up and down in this atomic scale from the atom to the sun, say for instance, or of our galaxy, would be what they call the powers of 10, the ability to go in and out, or from one step to the other, and the generations of heaven and earth. From the atom, Noah could be the neutron. Shem, Ham, and Japheth could be indicative of the more stellar, more star type generations, and then we go all the way down to the other three generations I can't see there right now. And during this time we have the patriarchal period, and this is the patriarchs of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, lived primarily in most opinions between 2000 BC and 1800 BC. It's also generally agreed that David lived around 1000 through archaeological evidence for his evidence, although the evidence is scarce and debatable. So this is agreements between lands and family, and I just wanted to point out here, I do have a whole series of information on what this actually refers to when it comes to understanding the natural elements in Genesis. I have a whole series of that, and I say that the son is the son of Abraham, and Abraham is the anthropomorphism of the periodic elements. It's very interesting. I'm not saying that everyone has to believe that, but that's what I think. Abraham is born after Noah, and he hears God tell him he's going to have a baby, and this baby will be part of the land that the Creator agrees to bless Abraham with. Moses hears God speak his covenant name Yahweh, Yah, and he sends him back to Egypt after he speaks to him in the Sinai. And then he goes back to Sinai. And here we have a delineation of the Noah, Abrahamic, Sinai, and Joshua and Israel into the promised land. Their particular places, the Noah, well, the Sinai is one where they built the Ark of the Covenant. You said, in fact, the religious context of the ancient Near East plays a huge role on the storyline of Israel. Have you ever read the Old Testament, and do you think, why do these people just not get it? How do they make a covenant with Yahweh and then go off and worship other gods? One of the reasons is because they were all polytheistic, and God wanted to show them that He is exclusively monotheistic. And then and you go more into the history, um, I am the only God, He says to His people, and He's making that as one of His cases for them to worship Him. And here we have details of the ancient land of the people. The 12th dynasty developed extensive trade. And with the Syro-Phoenician, Syro-Palestinian in his most likely period for initial contracts between Egypt and the Hebrew patriarchs by the most conservative estimates. This man would have been the Pharaoh who elevated Joseph to his high administrative post. Others would be more inclined to place the immigration of the Israelites to Egypt during the time of the Hyksos. And then you go on into the 13th dynasty, ushered in a gradual decline, and just some of the details about what was going on at the time of the ancient Egyptian dynasty. It was perhaps in a reaction against foreigners that the Israelites were reduced to slavery by the newly established regime. It should be noticed that the Egyptians did not fear the military might of the Israelites, but rather were afraid that they would join forces with their enemies. And then here we have the Tabernacle of Moses. Biblical story explained.
God is in the details. The Sinai Peninsula in the Middle East during Moses' time is our destination. Tents are all over the place. Over 1 million Israelis who were recently liberated from Egypt are housed in those tents. God had performed amazing miracles to get them this far. He had visited Egypt with plagues. He had split the Red Sea, allowing them to cross on dry land. They were en route to the Promised Land. The campsite is built around a unique structure that is 150 feet long and 75 feet wide. This remarkable structure in the wilderness has an outer court as well as an interior structure that includes the holy place and the most holy place. Each section of the tabernacle has its own furniture, each with its own purpose and meaning. The tabernacle and everything about it is a living book that teaches us the ABCs of salvation. A very powerful and popular question is, how can a sinful person enter heaven? The spiritual realities represented in the tabernacle contain God's response. A special building. The tabernacle took about 6 months to build. It could be disassembled and transported, but it would take over 8,000 people to transport all of the parts. When the glory cloud came to a halt in the wilderness, the entire nation would come to a halt, erect the tabernacle, and camp around it until the glory cloud resumed its movement. The tabernacle was constructed exactly as God had intended. Exodus 25, verses 1 to 9. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, that they bring me an offering. From everyone who gives it willingly with his heart, you shall take my offering. And this is the offering which you shall take from them: gold, silver, and bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet thread, fine linen, and goat's hair, ram skins dyed red, badger skins, and acacia wood, oil for the light, and spices for the anointing oil and for the sweet incense. These verses provide information about the materials that were to be used in the construction of the building. The people were instructed by God to bring an offering. They were to do it willingly and out of the goodness of their hearts. Exodus 36:6 tells us that the people had to be told to stop giving because they had given so much. Exodus 36, verse 6. So Moses gave a commandment, and they caused it to be proclaimed throughout the camp, saying, Let neither man nor woman do any more work for the offering of the sanctuary. And the people were restrained from bringing.
So that's a really interesting video. It goes on. God actually initiates by means by which His presence can be established on earth. So that's the whole wonder about this tabernacle, because it does have as it says, a cosmic stage to it. And I have broken down where the veil is actually the Van Allen belt, and the outer court would be more like the magnetosphere. And I'm going to go into that later on in my presentations, but suffice it to say that this stage of God's presence is extended eventually into the temple built by Solomon. So it's almost temple has Boaz and Joachim, the two pillars, which the north and south poles we have, north and south poles. So it's a picture of our cosmology, which is what you said, they were brought out of Egypt to take away their bad cosmology, and God was giving them the new good stuff. And so in this section, we're going to see some maps. Hill and Watson say, after nearly 2 centuries of foreign domination at the hands of the Hyksos, the Egyptian family set about restoring their nation to their own control. In an explosion of nationalistic fervor, the Hyksos were driven out from the land. The 18th dynasty was established under the Egyptian Pharaoh Ahmose. It was perhaps in a reaction against the foreigners that the Israelites were reduced to slavery and then, of course, then pushed out. It should be noted that the Egyptians did not fear the military. Oh, we already went over that, so that's good. So this is just going to be an overview of the land. Egypt, of course, on the left, and in the center is Canaan. We see how the lands and the people are combined to bring to the journey in the Bible, from individuals to tribes to then eventually cities and a single country. When they got to Israel, a lot of things happened. They needed to be good, or God would send them to a very bad land called Babylon. Israel would bless them with, or Israel would be blessed with good kings and bad ones. Israel would not be good, so prophets were sent to warn them of bad things, and they went to Babylon because they disobeyed, and when they learned their lesson after that, God did return them. So we have the 3 categories: prophet, priest, and king. But we're going to do, before we do the prophet, priest, and king, we're going to do Joel through Jonah, and then between 722 AD and 586 BC and 586 BC. So there's going to be like 3 different separate time signals here. Those that prophesy, these are the prophets. So they came in Joel through Jonah. Those that prophesied before 722, represented by basically are called pre-exilic prophets because they're speaking to the people of God before Assyria comes in and wipes out the northern kingdom. Between 72 and 586 BC, we get some kind of halfway prophets because they are speaking to the southern kingdom and beyond, to the aftermath of the northern destruction just before Babylon comes in and destroys Jerusalem. We get post-exilic prophets, those prophets that are coming back from the exile. They're once again speaking to Jerusalem, but in completely different context because they were returning from Babylon. You get Zerubbabel, Joshua, Ezra, Nehemiah's leadership. Now Joshua, I don't know why Joshua's in there, but they're trying to figure out who they are. So I'm going to have to figure that one out. So and that is from your notes. And then this is just an overview, Clarence Larkin overview of beginning on the left, the time between the eternities, the present age, and the age. So we're concentrating on the left side up until the time of the coming back from Babylon. But I like this because it shows everything. So we have prophets, and we have them. We have prophets, and then we have kings, and then we have Israel's kings, and then evil kings in here. And this is a segmentation, and it didn't come out huge, so I'm having problems reading it. But we could stop it in any time and enlarge it. And this is the Pentateuch Law, the historical section, history. So this just breaks down the general outline of the Old Testament. This chart reveals that God was at work very early in history to the time of the Babylonian exile and beyond. So these are just sections of the kings, Israel under Joshua and Judges, Israel under Egyptian, the wilderness, divisions, the post-exilic period, and then some other things, the Hebrew poetry, because we're going to be going into that next week. This is the kings before the divisions of the kingdom. So we saw the first king was replaced, of course, by David and his friend Jonathan. And that's the kings before the division of the kingdom. There were two kingdoms, Judah and the southern, and Israel the northern. And these are all of the kings that were that other chart, two back there, that shows it shows the evil kings in there and the prophets that were speaking to them. So go back and look at that and enlarge that. And this is the kingdom divided.
Majesty, nobility, justice. The Jewish equivalent of King Arthur's Camelot spliced into one. Take, for instance, war, idolatry, murdering prophets, civil war. Okay, maybe the legendary Jewish kingdom did have some problems.
So that's just an overview. You could say that God allowed kings for the love that he had for his people, not for the nations, because he didn't want them to have a king. Prophets are different. Prophets are sent as a result of man's inhumanity and blasphemy. You can't let a child go free, or they would not respect you. And in the same token, God had to speak out against rebellion, or it would metastasize. And that's just what it did. So you could say this, that God's garden is like a green field, and we're going to get to know more about what he's doing with the next garden, which is purposed in the tabernacle. But this is just a initial salvo into this whole matter. Where once was just dirt, God planted the people he wanted there, and all the life that would come after, to worship him. After thousands of years and a lot of hard work, Israel still remains and most likely will never be removed again. Thank you so much.